Hi there, and welcome to this video about scattergraphs with a focus on exam style questions. So, before we get into exam questions, let me just quickly give you the basics. So, basically, a scattergraph is when you plot points generated from the same source. So, it might be a pupil's maths marks and their science marks in a test. So basically every cross here represents one student. So this student got a relatively low score in maths paper, and they also scored with a low mark in science, whereas this student had a high mark in maths and a high mark in science. Now what this one shows, this is one of the common ones that you see, is that this has a positive correlation. And what that means is that students that scored highly in maths also scored highly in science, and students that scored lowly in maths also got a low score in science. So that's the first example. Okay, another type of example is this one. So let's give you an example. So you might plot individuals' amount of time spent exercising against the percentage of their percentage body fat. So clearly, the more exercise people do, generally the less body fat they have. So in this case, the more time spent exercising, the less body fat, and the less time spent exercising, the more percentage body fat. So this is a negative correlation. So they're the two main ones that you're looking for in terms of correlation. One slopes like that, positive correlation, and one slopes diagonally the other way. Now, you may come across an example that looks like the crosses have just been scattered on with no pattern at all. So here's a quick example. So this one is no correlation, and that's when the two things aren't related. So it might be shoe size and marks in a maths exam. Okay, so this person has a shoe size of 6 and scored 20 in the maths test. This person has a shoe size of 9 and also scored 20. So there's no real link between people's shoe size and how they perform in a maths paper. So that's the basics that you need to know before we do the question. So let's look at an exam question. So the scattergraph shows information about the height and arm length of each of the 8 students in year 11. So each of these crosses represents a student. So that's the graph. What type of correlation does this graph show? So as you can see, as height gets bigger, the arm length is also bigger. Students with shorter height have shorter arm length, which makes sense. So this is positive correlation. As one goes up, the other one goes up, so positive correlation. A different student in year 11 has a height of 148 centimeters. Estimate the arm length of this student. Now, for this question, I strongly recommend that you draw a line of best fit. So a line of best fit is trying to show the slope that you've got. So you can see a general slope going on there. You don't join the points up. All you do is draw a line that goes through and seems to represent the slope. So there's a bit of variation you can have on that. Maybe that needs to come down a bit more. Maybe that needs to go up a bit more. But I think I'd be happy with that. That's reasonably. Don't worry about this one. You're always going to, or you nearly always get a point that doesn't quite fit. That's fine. You just draw it, something like that. And that sort of shows the slope of the points we've got. One thing not to do is assume that you have to go through this point here. Very often students do that. You mustn't assume it goes for that point. It's very rare that they do that because they want to know that you know that it doesn't always have to go through that point. Anyway, so I've drawn a line of best fit. Now, let's go back to the question. A different student in year 11 has a height of 148 centimeters. Estimate the arm length. So we find the height of 148 and we draw a line. This is like you're working out up to the line. So I've gone 148 up to the line, and then we read across like that to this point here. Now on this one that appears to be 95. So sorry, 85. I'm reading off this scale here. It's halfway between 80 and 85, exactly halfway, so it's 85. So we're estimating that this is going to be 85 centimetres. And you do get a bit of leeway on that, but not too much. Right, next one. Scattergraph shows information about 10 apartments in a city. The graph shows the distance from the city centre and the monthly rent of each apartment. So here we go, there's the graph. So this one, the table shows the distance from the city centre and the monthly rent for 2 other apartments. On the scattergraph, plot the information from the table. So we've got to plot 2 against 250. So 2 against 250, it's about there. Always use a cross because it's far more accurate than just trying to do a circle or something like that. Next one is 3.1 and 190. 3.1 and 190. Okay, so that's those 2 points plotted there. Right, so I've done A. Happy with that. Describe the relationship between the distance from the city centre and the monthly rent. Well, it's negative correlation, so we could just put straight away that it's negative correlation. And that's fine. Some students might just talk about the relationship. So the further away from the city centre, the lower the monthly rent, or the nearer to the city centre, the higher the monthly rent. So you can say it in those terms. If it says the relationship, that's fine. If it says describe the correlation, then you ought to be putting down whether it's negative or positive. An apartment is 2.8 kilometres from the city centre. Find an estimate for the monthly rent. So again, we need to draw a line of best fit. I'm going to have mine something like that. Should be fine. And the line is there. So all I need to do now is draw a line from 2.8 as my distance. So 2.8 is just there. Go up to the line, and there's my point there. Okay, so 2.8 up to my line and read it off, which is 220. And that's it. So I hope that's helped.